It's January, and it's a movie with Tom Hanks and Meryl Streep, directed by Steven Spielberg. What did you expect?
The Post is directed by Steven Spielberg and stars Meryl Streep and Tom Hanks. This is based on a true story of the Washington Post during the Nixon era. After receiving some classified documents related to the Vietnam War, these journalists have to deal with the moral dilemma of whether they should publish these papers or not. Going into this movie, Chris and I both expected it to be good. It's directed by Steven Spielberg and has some big names in the starring roles. However, we both had very different opinions on it. So right off the bat, I have to say that this movie is very excellently directed. Steven Spielberg does a great job here. It looks great, and it's written pretty well as well. Also, no surprises here, Meryl Streep and Tom Hanks both do really well in the lead roles. The cast as a whole does a really good job, but there were a few standouts. What really surprised us both is how many big names are in the supporting cast for this movie. We've got Sarah Paulson, Bob Odenkirk, Bradley Whitford, Matthew Rhys, Alison Brie, Carrie Coon, Jesse Plemons, David Cross, and Zach Woods, just to name a few. For me, Matthew Rhys and Bob Odenkirk really stole the show. They've both done great work on TV shows like Better Call Saul and The Americans, so it was awesome to see them in a Steven Spielberg movie. I mentioned before that this movie is well written. What really surprised me about it is how involved I got in the story. Generally, with historical movies like this, I find myself getting a little bored, and this one kept me interested for the entire runtime. Now I'm going to throw it over to Chris, who had a bit of a different viewpoint on this movie.
So I'm just going to level with you guys. I did not love this movie. It was really well made. Steven Spielberg is an incredible director. Tom Hanks, Meryl Streep. I mean, it's all good in theory. But my biggest issue here was the fact that I felt like nothing really surprising happened. I don't want to use the word boring, but the whole movie just kind of happened with no real build up to anything super exciting. Now, I will say that the second half of this movie actually picks up a little bit. It makes up for the first half of the movie, but still, in general, the movie is a very slow burn. Again, nothing really super exciting happens. I mean, it is based on a true story, but at the same time, I expected to have some sort of a moment where I was like, yes, I am excited to see what happens next. Now, just a personal issue that I had with this movie is the fact that it felt really, really Oscar baity. You know, you've got Steven Spielberg, Tom Hanks, Meryl Streep, everybody that Walter listed in his pro segment. I mean, there's nothing inherently wrong with all those actors. In fact, I really did enjoy it, and I was always surprised to see like who was going to come up next. But it felt almost forced to an extent with how much talent was actually here. It kind of felt like, hey, let's just get anybody that we can into this movie just because Oscar season's right around the corner.
So all in all, I think this was a really good movie. I think it's definitely worth your time, but not one that I'm dying to buy on Blu-ray. I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10.
You know, I thought this was a really well-made movie, but kind of like what Walter said, I'm not desperate to see this one again, though I will say I'm a little bit more critical of it. I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10.